On the evening of November 11th, 2019, a 24-year-old woman collapsed in her cell during a medical check. The woman, Elisa Serna, never got back up from that fall. Despite medical staff having witnessed the fall, no care was provided, and staff left the cell, leaving her in the same position in which she fell. And that is where Elisa Serna died. And all of it was caught on camera. My name is Tracy, and I am a therapist, and I am 12 years in recovery from H addiction, and my goal is to help you build a happy and successful life after addiction. Welcome to the first episode in our new series, Death in Lockup. Today's content is a little bit different than the norm, but equally important. Our legal system in the U.S. has a long-standing history of mistreatment and lack of rehabilitation, often seeming to prioritize profit over reentry. As a mental health provider, this is extremely concerning to me and should be to all of us for several reasons. When people don't get the help they need, the cycle just continues. It continues for the individual, for the family, for the economy, the legal system. It just continues. So when someone is arrested for being hazardous to the community, it would be ideal for them to be psychologically assessed, provided treatment, and then determine if it's reasonable for them to rejoin society. Instead, what happens is we arrest people, and not only do they not receive treatment, but oftentimes, their mental and physical health actually deteriorates behind bars. So we make them worse, and then they're released with no support to repeat the cycle over and over again. This method is clearly not working, as evidenced by America's current recidivism rate of 62%. The U.S. has consistently held some of the highest recidivism rates among developed nations. Now, we can sit here and talk about the failures of the criminal justice system all day long. Trust me, I could, but that is not the point of this video. The only way to make real change is to take action and to spread awareness. And more specifically, our goal in this episode is not to talk about what happened to a criminal or a bad person. It is to shed light on the mistreatment and the injustice that Elisa Serna received. It's a story about what happens when those in crisis are punished instead of helped. And it's also about what happens when staff stop seeing inmates as humans and the horrifying consequences of it. Elisa Serna was a beautiful and vibrant 24-year-old woman born in December of 1994 or 1995. I apologize, I can't find the correct date on that. She was born in Escondido, San Diego County, California, and Alisa is described by her family as being highly intelligent, learning to read by the age of 5, and mature beyond her years with big, bright plans for her future. Alisa was also the mother to a little girl, Isabella, and she was 5 weeks pregnant with her second child. Alisa began struggling with addiction around the age of 17. And her parents, Paloma and Michael Cerna, say that while her addiction definitely affected her, certainly did not define her, and she remained deeply loved. And side note, please remember that this channel is a no judgment zone. Most of us here have been through addiction ourselves, and you never know what conditions bring someone to that path. But one thing is clear: no one chooses to become an addict. On November 6, 2019, Alisa was arrested for minor shoplifting. The store clerk says that she was trying to steal liquor from a liquor store. And because of this, she was booked into the Las Colinas Detention and Reentry Facility in Santee, California. Just 5 days later, on November 11, 2019, Alisa was dead. During her intake, Alisa was open with jail staff, telling them that she had recently used heroin, alcohol, and benzodiazepines, as well as the fact that she was newly pregnant. Missed opportunity number 1. If someone comes into a jail stating that they are pregnant and about to experience withdrawal, especially from that combination, benzodiazepines and alcohol, you already know this is a dangerous medical situation, and medical monitoring should have been put into place right then and there. Over the next few days, Elisa's condition began to deteriorate very quickly due to drug and alcohol withdrawal. Now, withdrawal can be extremely dangerous for a grown adult and even more dangerous to a 5-week-old fetus. Complications of withdrawal often include dehydration, seizures, and it is not uncommon for a pregnancy to be lost because of withdrawal symptoms. Fellow inmates report seeing Elisa stumbling, falling, and vomiting repeatedly. One documentation note from the nurse confirms that Elisa was vomiting clear liquid. She was also beginning to have seizures. Multiple seizures were witnessed before she was placed into the medical ward. Elisa remained in the medical ward for 2 days, during which her nausea was treated with Zofran and she was told to drink more water. Missed opportunity number 2. Again, here we have a conflict of interest. Cerna is showing signs of dehydration. These are observed and documented by the staff. She's told to drink more water, yet she is vomiting profusely, meaning the water and the nausea medication is likely not staying down. Now, I don't need to be a nurse to know that this situation is going to compound her dehydration, not fix it. It's likely that she needed IV fluids at this point, which is the standard treatment for withdrawal dehydration. After 2 days in the medical ward, on November 7th, Elisa was transferred to a medical observation cell due to her worsening condition. Now, as you can imagine, a medical observation cell is a one-man cell with windows and cameras for staff observation. The purpose of a medical observation cell is for the person to remain observed at all times so their health and safety can be attended to quickly if necessary. As Elisa was walking to the medical cell, she was clearly in distress, crouched over, stating that she couldn't walk. The nurse added to her documentation that while Cerna said she could not walk, her legs were operating just fine. And here we approach missed opportunity number 3, at minimum. If someone has had seizures, can barely walk, and are showing signs of dehydration, and again, pregnant on top of it all, 911 should have been contacted at this point instead of simply transferring Elisa into a different cell. That is not treatment. At this point, it is said that Elisa had experienced 11 seizures, vomited 64 times, and had 18 falls. Yet the only medical care she has had up to this point is Zofran for nausea and water, which was vomited back up. Now, this is just my opinion, but if Cerna had gone to the hospital at this point, it is likely that she could have been saved. It is highly likely that she could have been saved, but she wasn't. Instead, looking back on the publicly released documentation of jail medical staff, we read at one point that the doctor believed Cerna to be faking or exaggerating her illness. During her time in the Las Colinas County Jail, Dana Lee Pascua was the nurse on duty who was primarily taking care of Elisa. There were also 2 doctors at the Las Colinas jail. The doctors basically oversee all medical treatment from the nurse and will step in to intervene when necessary. One doctor was Dr. Frederic von Lintig, and the other doctor was Dr. Carol Ann Gilmore. Dr. Lintig was the primary doctor who had dealt with Elisa during her time there, and she is the one who stated that she believed that Elisa was exaggerating her illness, although she had no supportive documentation or evidence to back up this theory. The only thing that she said supporting this assumption was that some inmates do that, as in some inmates come in and exaggerate their illness for attention. So she believed that Elisa was doing the same, despite being on camera for 4 days straight with severe medical symptoms. Well, between November 7th and November 11th, while Cerna was in the medical observation unit, she submitted several medical requests asking for help and reporting her symptoms of seizures, falls, and vomiting. Elisa was also seen on camera pressing the call button repeatedly and banging on the door, desperately pleading for help in her final days and hours. Some of these requests were somewhat answered, and some of them were ignored. By November 11th, Elisa was still in the medical observation unit and on the final day of her life. On this day, she was taken to another overseeing jail doctor, Dr. Carol Ann Gilmore. She was brought to the medical area via wheelchair, and state notes from the camera captures observed that while she was waiting for Dr. Gilmore, Elisa's body stiffened up in her wheelchair with her head resting on the back of her chair and her feet dangling down on the floor. Again, I do not need to be a nurse to know that that is not normal bodily functioning and that this behavior seems very seizure-like. At this time, Dr. Gilmore chose not to physically assess Elisa. Instead, she simply looked at her through the window and ordered her a dose of 1 milligram of Ativan. She did not speak to Elisa, she did not take her vitals, and no examination was done. Instead, Gilmore watched as Dr. von Lintig assessed Elisa, with neither doctor stepping in to provide treatment or declare a medical emergency. And here is missed opportunity number 4. If Dr. Gilmore would have been operating according to the moral code required by licensed physicians, that day she would have ordered blood work, completed a physical examination, ordered IV fluids, or taken Elisa to the emergency room. We now have yet another medical professional involved in this case. We also have yet another medical professional involved in this case who has failed to act or provide any sort of life-saving care for Elisa. While Dr. Gilmore's encounter with Elisa was brief, the consequences of her interaction would luckily be much more lasting. So to recap, at this time on November 11th, Elisa has now been in custody for 5 days. She has been seen by 2 doctors and a nurse, as well as plenty of deputies. And she was in the medical observation unit where she was supposed to have 24/7 monitoring and frequent vital checks. Around 7 to 7:30 p.m. on November 11th, Elisa Serna was in her final hours of life. At this time, a deputy and the nurse came to the cell and spoke with Elisa through the door. They had Elisa get up and walk to the door in order to talk to them. They did not come in the cell. However, during their conversation through the cell door, Elisa fell. She hit her head on the wall and fell slumped onto the floor. After falling, there was very little movement from Cerna, but if you watch closely in the video, you can see her arms and her legs twitching or reacting erratically, which again is not normal bodily functioning. And Elisa would never get up again from that fall. After the fall, the nurse entered the cell to take her vitals while the deputy held the door and watched. Now, this is only my opinion again. I do not know what her vitals were. I don't have documentation of what they were recorded as that night, but I do not personally believe for a second that her vitals could have been normal at that point, a mere hour from death. There is no freaking way. Regardless, after checking her vitals, the nurse and the deputy left the cell, locking the door behind them and walking away. I have personally watched this video, and this part in particular was absolutely gut-wrenching. I was astounded to see jail staff walk away at this point. Elisa had not yet gotten up from her fall. She was still slumped on the floor when staff walked out. Her extremities were still twitching as though she was having a seizure. Her head was not checked from where she hit it during the fall. The nurse simply took her blood pressure and then walked out, leaving her exactly where she fell, slumped over in the corner of her cell, and that is where Elisa would remain until her death about an hour later. And here we have a huge missed opportunity number 5, again at minimum. A patient has a seizure, falls, hits her head, and never gets back up directly in front of the nurse, and the nurse walks away. Again, if 911 would have been called then and there like it should have been, they could have potentially saved Elisa. Instead, she died there on the floor of her cell with the deputy a mere few feet away watching her. Staff returned about an hour later to check her vitals around 8:30 p.m., and that is when she was found. At this point, staff attempted to resuscitate, but it was too late. Again, I reiterate that when this happened, Elisa was in a medical observation cell. You can see in the video that there is a deputy sitting directly across from her cell, only a few feet away. The deputy can see her through the windows, and the deputy sat there throughout that entire hour. As Elisa was dying, the deputy could see her barely moving, and no one checked on her. Nothing was done. So at just 24 years old, after 5 days of pure agony, Elisa was dead and would never have the chance to turn her life around. Her daughter was left without a mother, and her new baby was gone as well. Elisa's sentence for minor shoplifting was death, and it was enforced immediately. I don't think anyone can argue that the San Diego County Jail failed Elisa, but I want to also note that they failed her unborn child, who did absolutely nothing wrong. Neither Elisa nor her baby deserved this torture or inhumane death. Elisa's parents, Paloma and Michael, were informed via phone call of their daughter's death. Their lives were immediately and forever changed, and they were heartbroken, but they became guardians to Elisa's small daughter. They also became determined to make a change in the jail system, and they have been working ever since to enact these changes and hold the appropriate people accountable. And I am happy to say that they have succeeded for the most part. Although it took nearly 5 years for justice, the Cernas have remained dedicated to avenging their daughter. Jail nurse Dana Lee Pascua and overseeing doctor Frederica von Lintig were both charged with involuntary manslaughter for their negligence and failure to provide appropriate care to Elisa. The joint involuntary manslaughter trial began on January 19, 2024, and was concluded on February 9, 2024. It was argued that both Dana Lee and Frederica were negligent and failed to provide care to Elisa that could have saved her life. On the final day of trial, Nurse Dana Lee Pascua was found not guilty by the jury. Now, for Dr. von Lintig, the jury was completely deadlocked, leaning 9-3 in favor of acquittal, resulting in a mistrial. Now, that was disappointing to see. However, Dana Lee and Dr. von Lintig were not yet off the hook entirely, as von Lintig has since had her medical license revoked, and Dana Lee Pascua remains in an ongoing battle for her nursing license. However, I'm sure it is a little difficult for her to find work in the field at this point. A civil case was then filed against San Diego County, the Las Colinas Jail, as well as the outside company that provided medical staff to the jail, Coast Correctional Medical Group. On January 14, 2025, a settlement was reached, and the family of Elisa Serna received $15 million, $14 million from San Diego County, and $1 million from Coast Correctional Medical Group. New policies were also legally mandated, as well as judge supervision over Las Colinas Jail for the next year. The new policies include an updated fall policy because staff ignored Elisa when she fell. All falls are now to be considered a medical emergency requiring immediate physical evaluation. The entire department was required to undergo updated medical and compassion training due to the doctor's unsupported claims that Elisa was faking her illness. They also overhauled shift handoffs, implementing a rigorous standard communication protocol during staff shift exchanges. They also have a new strict vital signs protocol requiring medical staff to take and document vital signs for everyone in the medical unit at least once per shift. And a large expansion has also been made to the jail's MAT program, Medication Assisted Treatment Program, ensuring that inmates experiencing withdrawal receive the appropriate medical care and medications that they need to survive. The San Diego County Sheriff, Kelly Martinez, also spoke on the incident, stating that the treatment of Ms. Cerna was appalling and that she was guaranteeing changes within the department. Despite these overhauls, there have continued to be deaths in the San Diego County jails, with at least 111 documented deaths between 2019 and 2025. San Diego County in particular has repeatedly been flagged by the California State Auditor as well as independent data firms as operating one of the deadliest jail systems among California's largest counties. Personally, in my opinion, I feel that the real issue here is the loss of humanity in jail staff. Staff accused Elisa of exaggerating her symptoms, despite being seen in obvious distress for 4 days straight. Dana Lee Pascua watched Elisa fall, hit her head, and seize, and walked away. If someone had fallen like that out in public, let's say one of Dr. Von Lintig's or Dana Lee's family members had fallen like that, I bet that they would not have walked away so quickly. But in this situation, Elisa wasn't seen as a person anymore. She was an inmate, an addict, untrustworthy, and her life meant less on the inside than it did on the outside. Her baby's life meant less. And with more than 1,973,000 inmates locked up in America right now, that dehumanization is a problem. I always hear the famous line, "Don't get arrested, and then that won't happen." But we need to remember that we do not know everyone's circumstances, what they've been through and what they've experienced, what led them down the path that they went down. And we have no right to judge because as human beings, all of us have made a poor choice at one point or another in our life, probably several. What I can say with certainty is that every life in this world matters, and a bad choice does not change that. I can say with certainty that there are kids in jail who have made one wrong move, or people who could potentially get out and turn their lives around and make huge differences in this world. People who were wrongly accused, and people who have just never had the opportunity for the help that they deserve. Regardless of the reasons, going to jail does not make you less worthy or less human. And the ones that think it does, they scare me more than any inmate ever could. Thank you all for watching and for supporting Elisa. There is a website and YouTube channel titled Justice for Elisa Serna, from which I gained a lot of my information. I think it is made by her family, but I'm not 100% sure. So you can find more information there and ways to support the family. But at the very least, share this case. Tell people about this case. Continue to bring awareness to these kinds of injustices until change is made. I'll see you guys later.